When my husband introduced me as the housekeeper at his company party, I stood up, smiled, and said, "Actually, I'm his wife and the owner of this company." His boss turned pale and whispered, "Ma'am, we had no idea." What happened next left my husband on his knees. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. He avoided my eyes as I straightened his tie. His usual pre-event chatter was absent, replaced by a rigid silence that made my fingers feel clumsy against the silk. I smoothed the lapel of his tuxedo, a garment I had selected for him 2 years ago. "You look perfect," I said, because it was the expected thing to say. His hand came up, catching mine for a second before letting it fall away. "Simone, about tonight." He cleared his throat. "It's a very specific crowd, very corporate, conservative." "I am familiar with corporate crowds, Marcus." My voice was even. I turned to pick up my clutch from the hall table. I know. It's just the dress." He finally looked at me, his gaze skating over the emerald green gown I had chosen. It was simple, but the cut was impeccable, the fabric heavy and expensive. "The one we bought last week, the black one. It might be more appropriate." I paused. The black dress was from a high street retailer. It was fine. It was also shapeless and cheap, a fact he had overlooked when he insisted I try it on. I had bought it to humor him. "The green is Armani," I stated, a simple fact. "And it screams money," he said, a nervous laugh escaping him. "I just don't want my colleagues to get the wrong idea. Think I'm married to some society type. They value humility." A cold knot formed in my stomach. For 22 years, my husband had appreciated my taste. He had bragged about it. Now, it was a liability. I looked at him. The familiar, handsome face, the anxious set of his jaw. The man who had held my hand through 2 miscarriages and the frantic, glorious early years of building Viridian from a spreadsheet on my laptop. The man who, in the last 5 years, had begun to refer to my company as the tech sector, and my success as our good luck. "I'll change," I said. The words were ash in my mouth. In our bedroom, I let the green dress pool on the floor. I stepped into the black polyester. It felt insubstantial, like a costume. I did not look in the full-length mirror. The gala was in a downtown high-rise, all glass walls and cold, reflective surfaces. The city glittered below us like a spilled jewelry box. Marcus's grip on my elbow was firm, propelling me through the crowd. He collected a glass of champagne from a passing tray and handed it to me without looking. "Thorne, over here." A group of men stood near a panoramic window. I recognized Alistair Finch, Viridian's CEO, from his photos in annual reports. The others were younger, Marcus's peers and rivals. Their suits were expensive, their laughs just a bit too loud. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice shifting into its professional cadence, warm and confident. "Enjoying the view?" "Better now," said a man with a red face. His eyes swept over me, dismissive and quick. "Who's your friend?" This was the moment. 100 such moments in our marriage. "This is my wife, Simone. This is my brilliant wife." I took a small sip of champagne, waiting. Marcus's hand landed on my shoulder. It felt heavy. He gave a little squeeze, a gesture that was meant to look affectionate, but felt like a restraint. He chuckled, a hollow sound. "This lovely lady keeps my world running smoothly," he announced, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by the circle. He patted my arm. "Our housekeeper, everyone, Simone." The air left my lungs. It did not rush out in a gasp. It simply vanished, leaving a vacuum of pure, silent shock. The glass in my hand became an object of immense weight. The red-faced man nodded, a bland smile on his lips. "Always good to meet the help. Dedicated staff is so hard to find." Another man, younger, offered a perfunctory smile. "Nice to meet you." Alistair Finch glanced at me, a flicker of something, vague politeness, mild curiosity, before turning back to Marcus. On the topic of smooth operations, Thorne, the quarterly projections from your division. The conversation flowed around me. I was not a person. I was a piece of scenery. The housekeeper. I stood perfectly still, a smile I did not feel fixed on my face. Inside, a memory detonated. 7 years ago, a rented office with a leaky ceiling. My fingers were numb from typing. Marcus brought me coffee. "You're a genius, Simone. This is going to be huge." He kissed my forehead. The first investor check was framed on that damp wall. It was made out to me. The present snapped back. Marcus was laughing at something Finch said. He did not look at me. The humiliation was not a hot wave. It was a cold, settling sediment, layer upon layer of betrayal hardening in my core. He had erased me. In front of the men whose respect he craved, he had reduced me to a servant. My degrees, my company, our shared history, all of it was folded up and tucked away, leaving only this woman in a cheap black dress. I understood his calculation with brutal clarity. A beautiful, accomplished wife was a threat to a man like him in that room. It raised questions he could not answer. How did he get her? Is he just the husband? A housekeeper, however, was safe. She spoke of his wealth, his domestic order, without challenging his professional stature. She was a prop. The anger came then, not a flare, but a deep, igneous heat, solid and immense. It forged the cold sediment into something unbreakable. I let my gaze travel over the group. I memorized the condescension in their eyes, the way their attention slid off me. I noted the sheen of sweat on Marcus's temple despite the room's chill. I saw Finch, the powerful CEO, completely blind to the truth, standing silently beside his mid-level manager. My smile remained. It became my armor. I would play the role he had assigned me, for now. The red-faced man finished his joke. There was a round of guffaws. Marcus's laugh was the loudest. "Simone, darling," he said, finally turning to me. His eyes held a pleading warning beneath their joviality. "Why don't you go enjoy the canapes? We have boring business to discuss." It was a dismissal, a gentle shove toward the catering staff. I looked right at him. My voice, when it came, was quiet, perfectly polite. It held no tremor. Of course, it was a pleasure to meet you all. I did not walk away with the slumped shoulders of a servant. I walked with the straight spine I had developed in 1,000 boardrooms he knew nothing about. Each step in my heels was measured, firm. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in plain sight. I found a quiet corner near an ice sculpture that was melting into a shapeless blob. I placed my full champagne glass on a passing tray. I did not need a drink. I needed clarity. From this distance, I watched him. Marcus Thorne, my husband, basking in his fabricated reality. He had built a stage and placed me in the wings. He did not know I owned the theater. The decision formed with absolute calm. The hurt was there, a raw, aching wound, but I separated it from the task ahead. He wanted a housekeeper. He would get one. I would clean house. Every lie, every pretense, every stolen ounce of my dignity, I would sweep it all away. I stood there in the cheap dress, and I began to plan. The first move was his. The rest would be mine. I stood in the shadow of the melting ice sculpture. The cold air it emitted a tangible contrast to the heat of the room. My plan was simple. Observe and let the first domino fall of its own accord. It did not take long. Alistair Finch, having extricated himself from Marcus's circle, moved through the crowd with the weary grace of a seasoned captain. His eyes scanned the room, and for a second they passed over me. Then they returned. There was a slight frown, a flicker of reassessment. He had seen me standing with Marcus, heard the introduction. A good CEO notices anomalies. He altered his course and walked toward me. I did not move. "Good evening," he said, stopping a polite distance away. His voice was gravelly, practiced. "I don't believe we were properly introduced. Alistair Finch." I offered a small, neutral smile. Simone. A lovely party, he said, making the obligatory small talk. His gaze was analytical, trying to place me. Viridian spares no expense for its annual night of appreciation. It's important for morale. Is it? I asked, my tone mild, conversational. Morale seems high. The projections for Q4 must be reassuring. He nodded, a standard corporate gesture. They are solid. We have a strong pipeline. Of course, much depends on the continued confidence of our major stakeholders, our silent partners. He said the last two words with a particular weight, a mixture of respect and frustration. The majority shareholder prefers to remain a ghost. Makes my job interesting, ensuring every decision meets an invisible standard. I took a slow breath, the cool air from the sculpture sharp in my lungs. This was the opening. It was time to whisper the truth, to see if he was listening. The invisible standard, I repeated. I imagine it's a constant pressure. For instance, the decision to acquire Neuralink Analytics last year. That was a bold move. Not all the board was in favor, if I recall. Finch's affable expression did not change, but his eyes stopped their roving scan of the room. They fixed on me. The acquisition of Neuralink had been a contentious, closed-door board battle. The final vote had been split. The deciding vote had been cast by proxy, from the majority shareholder. The details had never been public. That's correct, he said, his voice a fraction lower. It was a divisive strategy. The integration has been challenging, but the data synergies are starting to materialize. He was reciting a line from a report, but his focus was entirely on me now. How did you... I ignored the question. I tilted my head, as if considering the ice sculpture. The justification was always the long-term data architecture, not the short-term profit bump. A 5-year horizon. The memo from the shareholders' office was quite clear on that point. Patience over panic. Finch took half a step back. The color began to drain from his face, leaving his skin a pale, waxy shade under the bright lights. He had written that memo himself, summarizing the terse, specific instructions he had received. He had discussed it only with the board. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked at me. Really looked. He saw the cheap black dress, but his eyes moved to my posture, the directness of my gaze, the utter calm. He was piecing it together, the impossible math. The housekeeper, the proprietary knowledge, the silent partner. The memo, he breathed, the word almost lost in the party's hum. That phrasing. Patience over panic. That was the exact... He did not finish. The truth arrived in his eyes, a dawning horror so profound it was almost physical. He understood the social catastrophe that had just unfolded in his midst. He had nodded politely at his own employer. His mid-level manager had introduced the company's owner as domestic staff. "Ma'am," he said, the word a strained whisper. He cleared his throat, a desperate, ragged sound. "Dr. Sterling, we had no idea. There was no briefing, no photograph." "There was no need for a photograph, Mr. Finch," I said, my voice still quiet, still calm. I kept my eyes on his, holding him in that moment of shock. My preference for privacy was intended to allow the company to function without cult of personality. It was not intended to facilitate public erasure. He flinched. Of course not. This is an unconscionable error, a profound disrespect. His eyes darted toward Marcus, who was laughing, clinking his glass with the red-faced man. When Finch looked back at me, his expression was one of pure, self-preserving panic. "Please, you must allow me to correct this. Immediately. I will call the room to order." "You will do nothing of the kind," I said. The steel in my voice was low but absolute. It stopped him cold. "You will not announce me. You will not make a scene. You will return to your guests, and you will continue as you were. But this is my matter to handle, not a corporate PR problem. You will, however, do one thing. Anything." The word was immediate, fervent. "The senior staff, the board members who are here. You will, in exactly 10 minutes, announce that an impromptu board address has been called, a matter of urgent strategic review. You will summon them to the conference room on the 40th floor. Discreetly, you will include Marcus Thorne on that summons." I watched him process the order. The CEO in him grasped the strategy: private, controlled, definitive. The man in him was terrified of the fallout, but he saw a narrow path to salvage his own position: obedience. "Yes, of course. The 40th floor conference room, in 10 minutes. He gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod. "Dr. Sterling, on behalf of the entire board, my deepest apologies for this travesty." "Your apology is noted," I said. "Now go. Your 10 minutes start now." He turned, a man moving through a nightmare. His steps were unsteady for the first 2 before he caught himself, straightening his spine, forcing his face into a neutral mask. He melted back into the crowd. I remained by the sculpture. The cold was pervasive now. I looked at my husband. Marcus had just accepted a fresh glass of champagne. He was grinning, telling a story, his hands moving animatedly. He was at the peak of his fabricated world. He had no idea the ground beneath him had just turned to glass, and I was holding the hammer. I felt no pity. The cold inside me had solidified into a clear, sharp instrument. Finch's horrified recognition had been the first concrete validation. My power here was not an abstract concept. It was operational. It had lawyers, board votes, and a terrified CEO at its command. I looked at the delicate watch on my wrist. I counted the minutes. I would let Marcus enjoy his champagne. I would let him feel secure. The higher the climb, the more precise the fall. I wanted him to see every step of the descent. When 9 minutes had passed, I pushed myself away from the wall. I did not walk toward Marcus. I walked toward the bank of elevators at the far end of the room. My heels made no sound on the thick carpet. I was a shadow departing the stage, moving to the control room. The real performance was about to begin. As I pressed the button for the elevator, I glanced back once. Finch was speaking quietly into the ear of a senior vice president, his hand on the man's shoulder. The VP's expression shifted from confusion to serious attention. He nodded and began moving through the crowd toward another cluster of executives. The ripple had started. By the time Marcus received his summons, the entire upper echelon would already be in motion, buzzing with confused speculation. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside the empty, mirrored cubicle. The doors closed, cutting off the sound of the party. In the silence, I looked at my reflection, the woman in the cheap black dress. In 10 minutes, she would be gone forever. The thought was not a wish. It was a promise. The elevator ascended in silence. The mirrored walls showed a woman composed, her hands steady, her breath even. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the noise of the gala was replaced by the hushed, dense quiet of executive space. Thick carpet, recessed lighting, original art on the walls. My own money had paid for this aesthetic. I turned left, walking toward the main conference room. The double doors were open. Inside, a long table of polished dark wood gleamed under a series of low-hanging lights. A few senior staff were already there, murmuring to each other. They looked up as I entered. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to confusion to careful neutrality as they took in my simple dress. I was an anomaly in this room of tailored suits. I did not sit at the table. I walked to the head of the room and stood beside the empty chair at the head of the table, my back to the floor-to-ceiling window with its staggering city view. I placed my hands on the back of the chair, feeling the cool leather. This was the position of address, not of participation. More people filtered in. I recognized faces from annual reports. The CFO, the head of R&D, 2 board members who served on my advisory committee. They did not recognize me. Their glances were quick, dismissive. They assumed I was an assistant, perhaps there to prepare the room. They gathered in small clusters, their low voices buzzing with speculation. What's this about? Finch looked like he'd seen a ghost. Market correction? Hostile bid? Then Marcus arrived. He entered with a confident stride, a half smile on his face, still riding the high of the party. He was speaking to the red-faced man from earlier. "Probably just a quick pep talk before the night ends," he said. Then his eyes found me. His step faltered. The smile froze, then melted into confusion. He scanned the room, saw the assembled leadership, and his confusion deepened into a slow dawning alarm. His gaze locked back onto me, standing at the head of the table. A silent question formed in his eyes. Alistair Finch entered last. He closed the double doors with a firm, final sound. The room quieted. All eyes turned to him. He did not look at me. Instead, he looked directly at Marcus, and his face was a mask of cold fury. "Thorne," Finch said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "A word, now." It was not a request. Marcus blinked. "Sir, is everything outside?" Finch turned on his heel and walked back out into the hallway. Marcus threw one more bewildered, almost pleading look my way before following his CEO. The room erupted into louder whispers. I did not move. I could hear the muffled sounds of the conversation through the heavy door. "You stupid, pretentious little man." Finch's voice, though hushed, was sharp enough to carry a tone. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Alistair, I don't understand. What is going on? Why is Simone in there?" "Your what, Thorne? Your housekeeper?" The word was a lash. "That woman in there is Dr. Simone Sterling. She is the majority shareholder. She is the silent partner. She owns Viridian. She signs my paychecks. And you introduced her to me, to the entire leadership team, as the help." There was a beat of absolute silence from the hallway. I could imagine Marcus's face, the blood draining from it, the world tilting on its axis. That's impossible," Marcus stammered, his voice rising. "She's my wife. She designs websites, freelance work." "Your wife?" Finch repeated, the fury now tinged with a sort of horrified awe at the scale of the ignorance. "Your wife built this company from a prototype in a garage. Your wife has held the controlling interest for 7 years. Your wife has voted on every major initiative from which you have benefited, and you never knew. You never bothered to know." "No." The word was a denial, weak and hollow. Then his voice changed, turning desperate. She couldn't have hidden that." "This is a mistake, or a test. She's testing me." "She's not testing you, you fool. She's ending you. Now get back in there, and for God's sake, do not speak unless spoken to." The door opened. Finch re-entered, his posture rigid. Marcus followed. He looked shattered. His skin was pale, his eyes wide and unseeing. He moved like a man in a dream or a nightmare. He did not look at anyone as he found a seat near the end of the table, as far from the head as possible. The room had fallen silent again, every person witnessing the CEO's public evisceration of a rising star. The pieces were connecting in their minds. Eyes flicked from Marcus's broken form to my still, silent one at the head of the room. The confusion was being replaced by a dawning, uneasy comprehension. Finch cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for assembling on short notice. We have a unique situation." He turned slightly toward me, his body language deferential. "This is Dr. Simone Sterling. She has, until tonight, preferred to remain our anonymous principal shareholder. Circumstances have compelled a more direct introduction." Every head turned to me. I felt the weight of their stares, shock, curiosity, fear, calculation. I removed my hands from the chair. "Thank you, Mr. Finch," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the quiet room. I looked at Marcus. He finally met my eyes. His were filled with a storm of emotions: betrayal, terror, humiliation, a desperate hope that this was still some terrible joke. I held his gaze for 3 seconds. I let him see nothing in mine, No anger, no hurt, no triumph. Only a calm, impenetrable resolve. Then I looked away, surveying the rest of the table. The circumstances Mr. Finch refers to involve a profound conflict of interest and a breach of professional ethics that directly concerns this executive team. We will address it now. Mr. Thorne will remain for the duration. I saw Marcus flinch at the use of his surname. I saw the final hope die in his eyes. The mask was not just slipping, it had shattered on the floor between us. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger whose fate I now held in my hands, and I had never felt more calm or more certain. The game was no longer hidden. It was on the board, in the open, and I had just made my first move. The silence in the conference room was total. My declaration hung in the air, a blade waiting to fall. The faces around the table were rigid masks of professional apprehension, all except for Marcus's. His was a portrait of disintegration. Alistair Finch was the first to move. He gave a sharp, precise nod. Of course. He turned to the room. The matter requires the attention of the full executive staff and all department heads currently at the gala. We will reconvene in the main event space in 5 minutes. Please inform your reports and proceed downstairs. A low murmur of assent filled the room. Chairs scraped back. People stood, their movements efficient, their eyes avoiding both Marcus and me. They filed out, a parade of expensive suits and troubled minds. Marcus did not move. He sat at the end of the table staring at the polished wood as if it held the answers. Finch lingered by the door. "Dr. Sterling, if you would allow me to make the initial announcement, to frame the situation appropriately." I understood his meaning. He wanted to perform his act of contrition publicly, to position himself on the correct side of what was coming. "You may introduce the topic," I said. "You will not introduce me. I will do that." He exhaled, a sound of relief. Understood. He left, closing the door softly behind him, leaving me alone with my husband. The room felt larger, colder. I walked to the window, looking down at the city. The party continued 39 floors below, a jewel box of ignorance. Marcus finally spoke, his voice cracked and dry. "Simone, please. We need to talk, just us." I did not turn. "We are talking." "Not like this, not with all of this." He gestured weakly at the empty room. "You can't be serious. This is our life, my career." "You ended our life 40 minutes ago when you introduced me as a domestic employee," I said, my voice flat. "You made my existence a tool for your career. I am now treating your career as a matter of corporate governance. It seems proportionate." He pushed back from the table, the chair legs screeching. "I made a mistake, a stupid social mistake. I was nervous. Those men, they're old school. A powerful wife intimidates them. I thought it would be easier." "Easier for whom?" I turned to face him then. He looked small, diminished in the vast room. "You did not think of me at all. You considered me an obstacle to be disguised. That is not a mistake, Marcus. It is an assessment." He stood up, his hands gripping the back of his chair. "So what? You're going to fire me? In front of everyone? Humiliate me? After 22 years? "You are confusing cause and effect," I said. "You provided the humiliation. I am merely revealing the consequences. And it is not about our marriage. It is about a conflict of interest. You have benefited directly and indirectly from the influence and resources of the majority shareholder without disclosure. That is a breach of ethics. The board must review it." "The board?" he laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "You are the board. This is just revenge wrapped in corporate jargon." "It is the only language this room understands," I said, walking toward the door. "You should have considered that before you brought me here." I left him standing there. The hallway was empty. I took the elevator down alone. When the doors opened on the event floor, the atmosphere had transformed. The aimless chatter of a party was gone. The music had been silenced. A low, anxious hum filled the space as clusters of Veridian employees gathered, their festive expressions replaced by confused concern. The senior staff who had been in the conference room were now scattered among their teams, speaking in low, urgent tones. A small stage had been arranged at the far end of the room with a microphone. Alistair Finch stood near it, clasping and unclasping his hands. He saw me and immediately straightened. I did not approach the stage. I moved to the periphery, observing. I saw the moment Marcus emerged from the elevator. He was visibly pale. A few people near him glanced his way, then quickly looked elsewhere, the social equivalent of stepping back from contagion. He made his way through the crowd, not toward me, but toward a group from his division. They did not open their circle to include him. Finch stepped up to the microphone. The feedback squealed, then died. The room fell silent, 200 people holding their breath. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience," Finch began, his voice amplified and strained. "An urgent matter of company governance requires immediate address. It pertains to standards of conduct, disclosure, and the ethical framework upon which Veridian is built." He was laying the groundwork using the dry language of compliance to prepare them for a human drama. He spoke for a minute about integrity, about the trust of stakeholders. His eyes kept flicking toward me. The crowd listened, impatient and bewildered. The specifics of this matter involve a senior employee and a previously undisclosed relationship with the company's principal shareholder. A ripple went through the room. Heads turned, searching. "Therefore, it is only appropriate that the shareholder address you directly." He turned fully toward where I stood. "Employees of Veridian Technologies, it is my profound honor to present to you for the first time our majority owner and guiding principal, Dr. Simone Sterling." A wave of utter silence crashed over the room, followed by a torrent of whispers. Every single head turned. 200 pairs of eyes found me, the woman in the simple black dress standing apart from the crowd. I saw the recognition dawn on dozens of faces. The people who had seen me with Marcus earlier, who had heard his introduction. Their confusion twisted into shock. I did not smile. I did not hurry. I walked from the edge of the room toward the stage. The crowd parted before me, a silent sea of suits and evening wear. My heels clicked on the polished floor, a measured, deliberate sound in the quiet. I could feel Marcus's stare from somewhere in the middle of the throng, a hot, desperate point of pressure. I ascended the 3 steps to the stage. Finch stepped away from the microphone, giving me a wide berth. I adjusted the mic stand, a small, practical action. I looked out at the sea of faces, at my company. I saw curiosity, fear, skepticism, and in a few, a dawning respect. "Good evening," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and required no amplification to carry. "For 7 years, I have been your silent partner. My silence ends tonight." I let my opening statement settle over the quiet room. I saw the questions in their eyes, the disbelief, the slow recalibration of reality. I continued, my voice level, a lecturing tone I had used in boardrooms for years. My silence was a strategic choice. It allowed the company's achievements to stand on their own merit, without the distraction of personality. It also prevented certain conflicts of interest from arising, or so I believed. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the audience until it found Marcus. He was staring at the floor. It has come to light that a senior employee, Marcus Thorne, has benefited from an undisclosed, intimate relationship with the controlling shareholder, that is, with me, his wife. A sharp collective intake of breath. The whispers died, replaced by rapt, horrified attention. This was no dry corporate speech. This was a public dissection. Therefore, the board must conduct a review. Transparency is required. I will now provide a factual overview of Mr. Thorne's career at Veridian, highlighting points where my influence as the principal shareholder may have created an unlevel field. I gave a small nod to Finch, who stood stiffly at the side of the stage. "The slides, please." A screen descended behind me, a projector whirred to life. The first slide was simple: career timeline Marcus Thorne. It listed his titles from junior analyst to his current role as Vice President of Strategic Operations. I picked up a small clicker. Mr. Thorne joined Viridian 6 years ago as a lateral hire from a smaller competitor. I clicked. The slide changed to show an organizational chart. His hiring was approved over 2 internal candidates with stronger technical profiles. The hiring manager noted exceptional cultural fit as the deciding factor. I looked at the crowd. I expressed a preference to the CEO at the time that the companies seek external talent for fresh perspectives. I did not mention a name. A recommendation from a shareholder is not a mandate, but it creates an atmosphere. I saw the hiring manager, a woman named Cho, in the 3rd row. Her face was carefully blank, but her lips were a thin line. She remembered. Next slide. Promotion to director, 18 months later. I clicked. A project list appeared. This promotion was based on the successful integration of the Atlas logistics software into the Eastern region. The project was behind schedule and over budget until a consulting firm, C-Stec Partners, was brought in for rescue operations. I looked at Finch. The board approved the unusual emergency contract with C-Stec. I approved the board's recommendation. C-Stec's founding partner is an old friend from graduate school. Mr. Thorne was not aware of that connection, but the rescue of his flagship project was instrumental to his promotion. A low murmur. This was not accusation. It was connective tissue. I was drawing lines between invisible points. Slide. VP appointment 3 years ago. I clicked. A financial chart appeared. This promotion followed the dramatic profit increase in his division after the acquisition of Kernel Data. I paused. The Kernel acquisition was my idea. I saw the strategic value in their patent portfolio. I instructed the board to pursue it. Mr. Thorne's division absorbed Kernel. The resulting profit bump was inevitable, not a result of his operational genius. It was a windfall handed to him. I could see people beginning to understand. They were looking at Marcus not with anger, but with a kind of pitying reassessment. His career, which had seemed like a model of ascent, was being revealed as a path laid over my hidden tracks. The final slide was a simple, stark list. Instances of access influence. Documented. 1. Fast-tracked review of division budget. Fiscal year 2022. 2. Override of vendor selection committee for divisional software. Fiscal year 2023. 3. Invitation and speaking role at Davos Satellite Conference. Board-sponsored slot. These are not illegal actions, I said clearly. They are, however, actions taken after I made general inquiries or expressed casual interest in these areas to the executive team. The perception of favoritism, once known, is corrosive. The conflict of interest is real. Mr. Thorne has operated for years with an unacknowledged advantage, one that compromises the integrity of every achievement listed on his resume and every decision he has made regarding the allocation of company resources. I turned off the projector. The screen went dark. The room was left in the ambient glow of the party lights, which now felt garish and out of place. I have allowed this conflict to exist through my silence. That ends now. The board will convene an emergency ethics committee. Mr. Thorne will be placed on administrative leave pending its review. All projects under his purview will be reassigned for interim oversight. I looked directly at Marcus again. He had lifted his head. His face was a wreck of shame and dazed comprehension. He was seeing the architecture of his career for the first time, and it was a house of cards built on my hidden foundation. "This is not personal," I said to the room, and it was the truest statement I had made all night. It was no longer personal. It had been elevated to a matter of policy, of law, of corporate bylaws. I had taken the searing, intimate betrayal and transformed it into a case study. This is a procedural necessity to protect the company. to ensure that every employee in this room knows that their advancement is based on merit, visible to all, and not on invisible connections. I stepped back from the microphone. Alistair will handle questions. There will be no further comment tonight. I descended the steps from the stage. The crowd parted once more, but this time the space around me felt different. It was not the void of a non-person. It was the buffer of respect, fear, and awe for a sudden, potent authority. I did not look back. I walked straight to the elevator bank, my task complete. The dismantling of his professional facade was now a matter of record. The board had its directive. The company had its new, visible truth. As the elevator doors closed, I finally released the breath I felt I had been holding since I first took the stage. My hands were steady. The cold inside me had found its purpose, and it was operational. The foundation of his lie was cracked. Tomorrow, I would begin on the structure of our life. The drive home was silent. I did not turn on the radio. The city lights streaked past the car windows, blurred lines of color against the black. I felt no triumph, only a deep, hollow fatigue. The performance was over. Now came the cleanup. I arrived at the house we had shared for 12 years, a modern, angular structure of glass and steel that stood on a wooded lot. My money had bought it. His taste had decorated it. I had never loved it. It was a showpiece, like so much of our life had become. I went directly to the bedroom. I did not turn on the main light, using only the lamps on my side of the bed. I pulled a large suitcase from the top of the walk-in closet, the one I used for extended business trips. I set it open on the bed. I began with efficiency, selecting items not with sentiment but with necessity. Work suits, blouses, undergarments, shoes. I packed the green Armani dress still in a heap on the closet floor where I had left it. I folded it carefully. From my jewelry case, I took only the pieces I had purchased myself, a few good watches, simple diamond studs, my mother's pearl necklace. I left the showy gifts he had given me over the years in their velvet boxes. I was in the process of gathering my toiletries from the master bathroom when I heard the front door slam open. The sound echoed through the cavernous space. Heavy, unsteady footsteps crossed the marble foyer, then came up the stairs. He appeared in the bedroom doorway. He had removed his tuxedo jacket and tie. His shirt was untucked, his hair disheveled. He held a bottle of whiskey in one hand. His eyes were bloodshot, his face blotchy. He stared at the open suitcase on the bed, at the stack of my clothes beside it. "What is this?" His voice was thick. "I am leaving," I said, turning back to the bathroom. I collected my skincare products and placed them in a zippered bag. He let out a harsh laugh. "Leaving? You just nuked my career in front of 200 people, and now you're leaving. You don't get to just walk away, Simone." "I do, actually." I walked past him back to the suitcase and placed the bag inside. He stepped into the room, blocking my path back to the closet. The smell of alcohol and stale sweat wafted from him. "We need to talk about this. We need to fix this." "There is nothing to fix." I looked at him, my expression neutral. "You broke it." "I am simply acknowledging the break." "It was a party," he shouted, the sound raw in the quiet room. "A stupid, meaningless party. You've thrown away 22 years over a social slip." I stopped packing and faced him fully. "It was not a slip, Marcus. It was a confession. You confessed that you are ashamed of me, that my success is an embarrassment to you, that you would rather present me as a servant than as an equal. That is not something you can take back. It is not something I can unhear." Saying, he shook his head, his expression twisting. "That's not what it was. You're twisting it. I was trying to fit in. Those men, they don't respect men who are overshadowed by their wives." "And there it is," I said, my voice quiet. "The truth. You felt overshadowed. So you tried to cut me down to a size that wouldn't cast a shadow. You did not come home and ask me to be low profile. You did not discuss your insecurities. You unilaterally erased me. That is not a partnership. That is an act of psychological violence." He took a swig from the bottle, wincing as the liquor went down. "You hid $1 billion company from me for years. Who does that to their spouse? You made a fool of me long before tonight." I protected my asset from a man I saw becoming increasingly obsessed with status and appearance, I stated. A man who began to refer to my work as a hobby. I was not wrong. Look at you. You are not furious about the lie. You are furious that the lie means you are less important than you thought, that your success was not your own. Your ego is bruised, not your heart. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. I had articulated the unspoken core of his rage, and it stripped him bare. The bluster left him. His shoulders slumped. He dropped the bottle onto a chair where it tipped over, spilling amber liquid onto the upholstery. He didn't notice. "I love you," he said, the words feeble, a last-ditch script. "No," I replied. "You loved the idea of a wife who made you look good without outshining you. I failed the second part, so you demoted me. The love was conditional, and I no longer meet the conditions." I turned back to the suitcase and zipped it closed. The sound was final. I wheeled it to the doorway, then went to my desk in the corner of the room. I opened a drawer and took out a manila folder. I placed it on the bed. "These are the deeds to the house, the titles to the cars. The joint accounts have already been frozen pending legal separation. My lawyer will be in touch. You can stay here until the divorce is settled. After that, I will sell it." He was crying now, silent tears cutting through the blotches on his face. "Simone, please don't do this. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything." I picked up my purse and slid the strap over my shoulder. I took the handle of my suitcase. I looked at him one last time. The man I had shared a life with, now a stranger weeping in a half-empty room. "There is nothing left to counsel, Marcus. The trust is gone. The respect is gone. All that's left is the logistics. My lawyer will handle them." I walked out of the bedroom, the wheels of my suitcase a soft rumble on the hardwood hallway. I descended the stairs. He did not follow. I heard only a choked sob from above, then silence. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool night air. I did not look back at the house. I loaded the suitcase into the trunk of my car, got in, and started the engine. As I drove down the long driveway, I felt the weight lift. Not the weight of sadness, that was a heavier, slower burden, but the weight of pretense. I was no longer playing a role in his story. The narrative was now entirely my own. The house in the rearview mirror was just a building. The man inside it was just a man. And I was finally, completely free. I spent the night in a suite at the Chancellor, a hotel known for its discretion and its 24-hour room service. I did not order food. I slept for 5 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep of utter exhaustion. When I woke at 7, the first thing I did was call my personal assistant, Eleanor. She had been with me for a decade, running the small, efficient office that managed my private holdings. She knew everything. She was the only person, aside from my lawyer and accountant, who did. "Eleanor, I'm at the Chancellor. I need you to bring a change of clothes to the office, the navy suit. I have a 10 o'clock with Alistair Finch." There was a brief pause on the line. Eleanor never wasted words on unnecessary questions. "Understood. The news is circulating through Viridian's internal channels. The narrative is chaotic." "I imagine it is. I'll be there by 8:30. I showered, dressed in the clothes from my suitcase, a simple pair of trousers and a sweater, and drove across the city to a different building altogether. Not the gleaming Viridian Tower, but a smaller, older, Art Deco building in the financial district. My company, Sterling Holdings, occupied the top 2 floors. Very few people knew what Sterling Holdings was. The private elevator opened directly into my reception area. It was quiet, decorated in warm woods and soft textiles, a stark contrast to Viridian's chrome and glass. Eleanor was at her desk. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a perpetual calm. A garment bag hung from a hook beside her. "Good morning, Dr. Sterling." Her voice was neutral, professional. "Your suit is pressed. I've taken the liberty of scheduling a call with legal for 11:15 to discuss the separation agreement. Mr. Finch has confirmed the 10 o'clock. He sounded agitated." "He should be," I said, taking the garment bag. "What's the word from Viridian?" She handed me a single sheet of paper, a bullet point summary, Eleanor's specialty. The official memo from HR states that Mr. Thorne is on administrative leave pending an ethics review. Unofficially, the story of the gala has metastasized. The housekeeper introduction is common knowledge. So is your subsequent address. The consensus among mid-level staff, based on my sources, is a mixture of shock and schadenfreude. Mr. Thorne was not universally popular. His sudden ascent bred resentment. That resentment now has a focal point. I scanned the points. And the executive floor? Quiet, cautious. Several have called here trying to get a read on the situation. I have directed them to your standing policy of no comment. Mr. Thorne has not attempted to enter the building. His access cards were deactivated at midnight, per your instruction to security. I nodded. "Thank you, Eleanor. Hold my calls until the meeting with Finch." In my private office, I changed into the navy suit. It was tailored, authoritative, a uniform of control. I sat behind my desk, a vast, solid piece of walnut, and looked out at the city. This was my true vantage point. From here, I could see the Viridian Tower in the distance, a silvery needle against the sky. The party, the humiliation, the shattered marriage. They were events that had happened down there, in the world of appearances. Up here, they were data points, factors in a strategic equation. At 9:50, I took the elevator down and walked the 2 blocks to the Viridian Tower. I used a private access card that took me to the executive floor without passing through the main lobby. The environment was different today. The usual low hum of activity was stifled. People spoke in hushed tones. As I walked toward the conference room Finch had designated, every door I passed seemed to be slightly ajar, every assistant suddenly very busy at their computer, avoiding eye contact. I heard a snippet of conversation from an open break room as I passed. Introduced her as the cleaner. Can you imagine the ego? The voice cut off as its owner saw my shadow pass by. Finch was waiting for me in the conference room, alone. He stood as I entered. He looked like he had not slept. "Dr. Sterling, thank you for coming." He gestured to a seat at the head of the table. I took it. "The board's ethics committee convened at 8 this morning," he began without preamble, placing a document in front of me. "Their preliminary finding is that the conflict of interest is severe and irremediable. They recommend termination." I glanced at the document. The language was dry, legalistic. And the mood of the board regarding the publicity. Finch's jaw tightened. "They are embarrassed and furious with me for not knowing your identity. They see it as a massive governance failure. My position is under review." He said the last words carefully, watching for my reaction. "Your position is secure, Alistair," I said, looking up at him, "provided you handle the termination correctly. The board needs a scapegoat. You will give them Marcus Thorne, cleanly and with finality. That will satisfy them." The relief on his face was immediate, palpable. "Of course, we can draft the papers today. Termination with cause for failure to disclose a material conflict of interest. It will be brutal, but it's justifiable." I leaned back in my chair. "No, not with cause." He blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You will terminate him. You will offer a standard severance package. 6 months' salary, continued benefits for that period. No cause will be stated publicly." Finch was confused. "But the ethics violation, it's clear. With cause protects the company from any wrongful dismissal claim. And after what he did was personal," I interrupted. "Terminating him with cause makes it a corporate punishment. It gives him a grievance. It allows him to play the martyr, to claim he's being punished for a private marital dispute. A clean, no-cause termination with a modest severance is a business decision. It says he is not important enough to fight over, not worth the drama. It is a professional dismissal, not a punishment. It erases him quietly. That is what I want. I watched him process the logic. He was a corporate creature. He understood the language of cold, strategic mercy. A fight would keep Marcus in the narrative. A quiet, bureaucratic exit would make him disappear. He won't take it quietly, Finch said. He will have no choice. The alternative is termination with cause, and a legal battle he cannot afford and will not win. His lawyer will advise him to take the deal, have the papers drawn up, send them to his home address today. My only condition is a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement covering the events of the gala and the true reason for his departure. He signs that or he gets nothing. Finch nodded slowly, seeing the entire trap now. A graceful exit, but with his voice permanently silenced. I'll have legal prepare it immediately. Good. I stood up. Handle it, Alistair. This is your chance to demonstrate your utility to the new order. I left him in the conference room. As I walked back through the hushed executive floor, I felt the eyes again. But the narrative was already shifting. I was no longer just the humiliated wife. I was the owner who had come in, made a decision, and left. The story was becoming about the company's future, not the past night's scandal, and Marcus Thorne was becoming a footnote, a problem being efficiently resolved. The ripple was now a current, and it was flowing in my direction. The papers were delivered by courier to the house at 2:30 that afternoon. I knew this because I received a notification from the security system I still controlled, a brief alert for front door access. I was in my office at Sterling Holdings, reviewing the divorce petition my lawyer had drafted. It was a clean, clinical document, dividing assets with precision. The house, the cars, the joint investments, all were accounted for. There were no emotional clauses, just the mechanics of separation. At 3:15, my personal line rang. It was Alistair Finch. It's done, he said, his voice subdued. The courier confirmed delivery and signature. Mr. Thorne signed the termination agreement and the NDA. His lawyer was present. There was some negotiation over the severance duration. They asked for 12 months. And? We held at 6. They accepted. The lawyer advised it. The NDA is airtight. He cannot speak about the gala, your ownership, the reasons for his departure, or the existence of the NDA itself. Any violation results in full clawback of the severance and opens him to significant civil liability. I felt no satisfaction, only the confirmation of a correct prediction. And the internal announcement? Ready to go out at 5 p.m. It will state that Mr. Thorne is leaving Viridian to pursue other opportunities, and we thank him for his service. Standard, bland, forgettable. The Ethics Committee findings will be sealed. Good. Send me a copy of the signed documents for my records. I will. He paused. Dr. Sterling, he asked for a meeting with you, a personal appeal. He was quite insistent with his lawyer. Denied, I said. Any further communication should go through legal channels. Is that clear? Perfectly clear. He sounded relieved to have a directive. Thank you for your guidance in this matter. I ended the call. I swiveled my chair to look out the window. The afternoon sun glinted off the towers of the financial district. It was over. Professionally, legally, it was finished. Marcus Thorne was now a former employee, bound to silence, cut off with a modest check that would run out in 6 months. The narrative was contained. The company could move on. I could move on. Eleanor entered without knocking, her standard practice when my door was open. She placed a single sheet of paper on my desk. It was the draft of the internal announcement. I scanned it. It was exactly as Finch had described, bland corporate speak, a dignified burial for a career. Approve it, I said, and draft a separate memo from Sterling Holdings to the Viridian board. Inform them that with the resolution of the conflict of interest matter, I will be taking a more active, public role as principal shareholder. A transition plan will be presented next week. Understood. She made a note on her tablet. Your 4 o'clock is here. Mr. Aris from the investment committee. The rest of the afternoon proceeded with a normalcy that felt almost surreal. I met with my investment team. We discussed portfolio allocations, market trends, risk assessments. No one mentioned my personal life. No one mentioned Viridian. It was business conducted in the quiet, carpeted rooms where real power resided, far from the dramatic stages of galas and public confrontations. At 5 o'clock precisely, my phone buzzed with an alert. The internal memo had gone out to all Viridian staff. I could imagine the flurry of emails, the instant messages, the hushed conversations in cubicles. He's gone. Just like that. Pursuing other opportunities. Sure, the official story would become the truth, simply because it was the only one allowed to exist. The more salacious version, the housekeeper, the showdown, would fade into company legend, a whispered story without official confirmation, eventually dissolving into myth. I left the office at 6. The city was in its evening rush. I returned to the chancellor. A small parcel was waiting for me at the concierge desk. It was from my home. I had ordered a service to collect a few more personal items: photographs, books, the small ceramic vase my mother had made. The sight of the box, sitting alone on the marble counter, brought a sharp, unexpected pang. Not of loss for Marcus, but for the life I had thought I was building. The life that had been, it turned out, a set decoration. I took the box to my suite. I did not open it. I placed it in the closet. I ordered dinner from room service, a simple salad, grilled fish. I ate at the table by the window, looking out at the city lights. I considered the completeness of the severance. The mercy of it was its most brutal aspect. By not fighting him, by not making a public spectacle of his firing, I had denied him the oxygen of outrage. He could not claim persecution. He could only sit in that empty house with his 6 months of salary and his legally enforced silence, and contemplate the sheer, quiet efficiency of his erasure. My revenge was not in his suffering, though suffering was inevitable. My revenge was in the restoration of order, my order. I had taken the chaotic, humiliating mess he had created and processed it through the systems I commanded: corporate governance, legal contracts, public relations. I had converted a raw, personal betrayal into a series of administrative actions, and in doing so, I had proven to myself most of all that the world he had tried to diminish me in was a world I controlled. The phone on the desk rang. It was the front desk. Dr. Sterling, apologies for the disturbance. There is a gentleman in the lobby insisting on seeing you, a Mr. Thorne. He is quite agitated. Security is with him. What would you like us to do? I took a slow sip of water. I had known he would come. The signed papers were not enough. The quiet severance was not enough. He needed a finale, a dramatic confrontation. He was still trapped in the world of appearances. I had moved beyond it. "Tell him I am not available," I said, my voice even. "If he refuses to leave, you have my permission to have him removed from the property." "Understood, doctor." I hung up. I finished my meal. The city glittered, indifferent and beautiful. The final move was his, and I knew exactly how it would end. The next morning, I went to my office at Sterling Holdings as usual. The hotel had informed me that Marcus had been escorted out by security the previous night. He had shouted my name, they said, but left without further incident. I expected that to be the end of it. I was wrong. Eleanor buzzed my intercom at 10:15. Her voice was taut. "Dr. Sterling, your husband is in the reception area. He insists on seeing you. He is not in a stable condition. Security is on standby." I considered the options. Refusing would likely cause a scene in my outer office, a spectacle for my staff. Seeing him would give him the audience he craved, but on my territory, under my control. Send him in, Eleanor. Have security remain just outside the door. Understood. I did not stand up from behind my desk. I placed my pen neatly on the blotter and waited. The door opened. Marcus looked worse than he had at the house. His clothes were rumpled, as if he'd slept in them. His eyes were bloodshot and hollow. He had lost the bluster from the night at the house. What stood before me now was pure, raw desperation. He closed the door softly behind him and leaned against it for a moment, as if gathering strength. Then he walked forward until he stood directly in front of my desk. He did not sit in the guest chair. Simone. His voice was hoarse. Marcus. I kept my hands folded on the desk. You are violating the terms of the NDA by being here. Any discussion of the circumstances of your departure is prohibited. To hell with the NDA, he burst out, the sudden volume startling in the quiet room. He gripped the edge of my desk, his knuckles white. You can't do this. You can't end everything like this. I signed your damned papers. I took your money. Now talk to me, as my wife. For 22 years, that meant something. I looked at his hands on my desk. It meant something until you introduced me as a domestic employee. You ended the marriage in that moment. I am merely finalizing the paperwork. It was a mistake, he cried, his composure cracking. A terrible, stupid mistake. I've apologized. What more do you want, blood? I want nothing from you, I said, my voice level. The transaction is complete. You have been compensated for your silence. There is nothing left to discuss. Compensated? He let out a ragged laugh. 6 months' salary for my entire career, for our life? You call that compensation? You've taken everything. My job, my reputation, my home, my wife. You've left me with nothing. You have 6 months to find a new job, I stated. The reputation you have is the one you built on a foundation of hidden advantages. The home was purchased with my capital. The wife you lost was the one you chose to humiliate. These are the consequences of your actions, not my theft. He stared at me, his breath coming in short gasps. The anger seemed to drain out of him as quickly as it had flared, leaving behind a terrifying vulnerability. Please, he whispered. The word was stripped bare. Please, Simone, I'm begging you. Don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll get a lower-level job. I'll tell everyone the truth, that I'm a fool, that you're brilliant. Just don't make me leave. Don't end us. I watched him, unmoved. His pleas were the last thrashing of a man who finally understood the depth of the hole he had dug. It is already ended. The decision is not emotional, it is logical. The trust necessary for a partnership is gone. It cannot be reinstated by pleading. He shook his head, tears now spilling down his cheeks. He seemed to shrink before me. You're so cold. How can you be so cold? I loved you. I still love you. You loved an idea of me, I corrected him, an idea that became inconvenient. The reality of me is sitting here, and the reality is that you are a former employee and soon-to-be ex-husband creating a disturbance in my place of business. His legs seemed to give way. He didn't simply sit in the chair, he collapsed forward, his knees hitting the thick carpet with a soft thud. He knelt on the floor before my desk, his body folded in on itself, his face in his hands. Great shuddering sobs racked his frame. It was the complete collapse, the total surrender I had known would come. Please, he wept, the word muffled. I can't live without you. I have nothing. I am nothing. Forgive me. Please, just forgive me. I looked down at him. This man who had been my partner for half my life, now broken and begging at my feet. I felt a distant clinical pity, the kind one might feel for a specimen under glass. The love was gone, burned away by the cold fire of his betrayal. All that remained was the clear, clean space of resolution. Marcus, I said, my voice calm and final, get up. This is undignified. It changes nothing. He lifted his head, his face ravaged by tears. He searched my eyes for any hint of softening, any crack in the ice. He found none. The understanding that it was truly, irrevocably over dawned in his expression. The begging stopped. The sobs subsided into silent, heaving breaths. The last flicker of hope extinguished. What was left was a hollow man. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up from the floor. He did not look at me again. He turned and walked unsteadily to the door. He opened it. 2 security guards from the building stood in the reception area, Eleanor watching sternly from her desk. He walked past them without a word, his shoulders slumped, heading for the elevator. The guards looked at me. I gave a slight nod. One followed him at a discreet distance to ensure he left the building. I turned my chair to face the window. The city stretched out below, immense and enduring. The climax was over. The last appeal had been made and denied. The final knot was tied. There was nothing left now but the future. 6 months later, the press release went out at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was a straightforward corporate announcement. Viridian Technologies named Dr. Simone Sterling as its new chief executive officer and chair of the board, effective immediately. It cited her founding vision and her historical role as principal shareholder. There was no mention of a silent partner. There was no mention of the past. The business news sites picked it up within the hour. By noon, my assistant at Viridian, a competent young man named David, had fielded 17 interview requests. I chose one, a respected digital business journal known for substantive profiles. The interview was conducted in my new office, the CEO's office on the top floor of the Viridian Tower. It had been Alistair Finch's office. I had it redesigned. The furnishings were lighter, the art more modern. The wall behind the desk was now a floor-to-ceiling window. I did not sit behind the desk for the interview. We sat in 2 chairs by the window, a low table between us. The journalist was a woman in her 40s, sharp, prepared. Dr. Sterling, your emergence as the owner and now CEO is the talk of the sector. Why end the anonymity now? I had anticipated the question. Anonymity served its purpose. It allowed the company to establish its identity separate from any individual. Now, the company is established. My value is in providing a clear public direction. Consistency and transparency are assets in this phase of growth. She nodded, making a note. The press release mentions you're the founder, yet the public story for years was that Viridian was built by a consortium. Why the discrepancy? A strategic choice at inception, I said, my tone matter of fact. Early-stage companies often benefit from a narrative of collective strength. It attracts a different kind of talent, a different kind of investor. The truth was never a secret. It was simply not the headline. Now, it is. And your predecessor, Alistair Finch. His departure was announced as a retirement. Alistair served Viridian well for many years. He reached a natural transition point. He will remain on the board in an advisory capacity. This was the agreed-upon story. Finch had accepted the graceful exit I offered. He was, in his way, grateful. The journalist leaned forward slightly. There's been speculation about your personal life, a divorce finalized recently, and a former executive, Marcus Thorne, leaving the company around the same time. Is there a connection to your new, more public role? I met her gaze. This was the moment. I could shut it down, cite privacy, but I had calculated that a measured acknowledgement was more powerful than denial. My personal life underwent a significant change. That change clarified my priorities. It reinforced my belief that leadership, in business and in life, requires authenticity. One cannot build anything lasting on a foundation of pretense or disrespect. My focus now is entirely on Viridian's future. The past is a private matter. It was a non-answer that answered everything. She heard the finality in my tone. She moved on to questions about product roadmaps, market expansion, diversity initiatives. I answered with specificity. The interview lasted 40 minutes. After she left, I remained by the window. The city lay below, a grid of possibilities. My apartment, a penthouse in a building 2 blocks away, had a similar view. I had bought it with the proceeds from the sale of the marital home. The divorce settlement was clean, swift. He got a lump sum, larger than required by law, in exchange for a quiet, uncontested process. I heard through residual channels that he had moved to another state. I did not inquire further. My life now had a different rhythm. I worked. I read. I took walks along the river. I had dinner once a week with a small circle of friends, most of whom had known me long before Viridian, who had cheered my quiet success and now cheered my visible one. There was no one else in the penthouse. The silence there was not an absence. It was a space I had chosen and filled with my own presence. The article was published 3 days later. The headline read, "Simone Sterling, from silent partner to CEO on her own terms." The photo showed me in the chair by the window, looking out, a slight composed smile on my face. The article was fair. It mentioned the personal reshuffling but focused on my plans for the company. It quoted my line about authenticity and respect. That afternoon, I held my first all-hands meeting as CEO. I stood on the same stage in the event space where I had stood 6 months before. The room was full, but the atmosphere was different. There was no shocked silence, only the attentive focus of employees looking to their leader. I spoke for 20 minutes. I outlined my vision. I took questions. A young woman in the engineering department asked about work-life balance initiatives. A man from sales asked about commission structures. They saw me. They heard me. I was not a ghost or a housekeeper. I was the person in charge. After the meeting, as I walked back to the elevators, people nodded. "Good speech, Dr. Sterling." "Welcome aboard, CEO." The acknowledgments were professional, respectful. In my office, I reviewed the day's final documents. David brought in a copy of the business journal, the one with my profile. He placed it on the desk. "A good piece," he said. "Thank you, David. That will be all for today." He left. I picked up the journal. I looked at the photo, at the woman in it. She looked poised, certain. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and emerged, not scorched, but tempered. I placed the journal back on the desk. I stood by the window as the sun began to set, washing the glass towers in gold and orange. The memory of the gala was distant now, a lesson learned, a catalyst that had propelled me to this precise point. The humiliation had been converted into fuel. The betrayal had been processed into boundary. The love had been grieved and released. I felt no lingering anger. It had served its purpose and dissipated. What remained was a profound sense of ownership, of the company, of my time, of my identity. The vengeance had not been a dramatic punishment inflicted on another. It had been the systematic reclamation of myself. He had tried to reduce me to a role. I had expanded until the role fit me, and then I stepped into the light wearing my own name. The phone on my desk buzzed. It was the security desk. "Your car is ready, Dr. Sterling." "Thank you." I gathered my briefcase. I took one last look at the view, at the city that held my past and my future. I turned off the light and walked out. The heels of my shoes tapped a steady, confident rhythm on the polished floor, a sound that echoed in the empty hallway, belonging only to me.